I'm going to say good. Well, it depends. I mean, afternoon, I guess, in the central time zone, but several of you from the Pacific time zone. So good day. How's that? And we say welcome to the SEA Leadership Retreat, which is day 2, obviously. My name is Leo Barron. I am the MO and Community Services Director, and I'm really happy to see you all here. This is great to be able to share this kind of information, and you are specifically attending the interactive SEA education session titled Effectively Managing Your SEA, Large and Small. And this session is being recorded so that you know too. With me today, I'm very fortunate to have 2 thought leaders which will be guiding you through all this information, and that's Sherry Budziak and Kevin Ordonez of OrgSource. And I will never do them justice if I attempted to introduce them. So Sherry, Kevin, would you mind doing that for me? Giving the folks that are involved here today just a little background on who you are. We'd appreciate that.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Leo, and welcome everybody. So just to provide you with a little bit of background about me, as Leo said, my name is Sherry Budziak. I have more than 25 years of association experience. I worked for 2 associations as senior staff before I started the consultancy OrgSource. And I founded OrgSource in 2005, and we provide management services to associations. So not only have I kind of filled the role of an association management, but we do a lot of management services as well and consulting services. But very relevant to how you guys are all managing your SEAs, Kevin and I founded a company called .org Community that runs as a membership organization as well. So we've been running that organization for about 6 years, and it's a small organization that does education and events and think tanks and those types of things for association executives. And then we are also the author of 2 books, which I will tell you about after Kevin introduces himself.
Great, thanks, Sherry. And thank you everyone for allowing us to share some time with you today. My name is Kevin Ordonez, and I've been servicing this market space industry now for a little over 25 years. First as a consultant in the DC area, and then as part of a team member at a large trade organization in DC that also had a lot of state association affiliates. And then I decided to be a software entrepreneur, and I started a company that provided and recreated association management software that runs the operations of associations, small to large, and ran that for several decades. And then I created a consulting company called Association CIO that did a lot of strategic tech planning with organizations. And then Sherry and I merged our companies about 10 years ago. So happy to be here, and also Sherry's partner on our .org community membership organization, as well as a couple of books that we released a couple years ago.
So just provide you a little bit more background. So kind of in our quest with our membership organization, we were running a bunch of think tanks about kind of the future of associations, and our members kind of challenged us to go out and interview other executives about how they were managing their organizations and what was positioning them for success. So we interviewed folks like Gary Sapiro from Consumer Electronics and the Trucking Association, the Planning Association. And so we produced this book, ended up being a book, Association 4.0, Positioning for Success in an Era of Disruption. And then we did another book that was interviews based on folks that are servicing the association community. So in addition to, just to provide you with a little bit of background, so in addition to a kind of our hands-on knowledge of operations and then running our own organization, we also kind of did our even more homework by interviewing some other CEOs that were servicing the industry. So with that said, today, we are going to kind of break up this discussion into 3 different areas, just to kind of to frame the discussion and talk about, how do we optimize engagement? How do we optimize people, whether that's volunteers, staff, and how do we optimize our operations? And I put up here, ask us anything. So if you stump us and somebody else has a great idea that's on this meeting today, feel free to jump in, because while we have a lot of experience, I'm sure there's something that there's things that we don't know. So with that said, we really wanted to talk about a little bit about, how are we engaging our members online, or are we engaging our members online? Are you making it easy to connect? And how are we engaging with our volunteers? So to kind of start off, we had a quick poll. If somebody can throw the poll up there. So are you currently today engaging with your members virtually? Yes, no, or you plan to in the future?
And Sherry, so they're coming in. And I think we're just about there. So are you ready? Here we go. End the poll, and we just
That'd
did.
be great.
And we're going to share the results.
So great. So it looks like most everybody is engaging with members online. As we all had to, obviously, a lot of us had to pivot really quickly last year. There's a lot of conversation going on today of, how much do we continue to do virtual and continue to engage and have meetings and discussions like this compared to what it looks like going back in person. So I just kind of wanted to get a gauge from you guys on whether or not you were working with your volunteers and members online. So some strategies, and I'm just gonna just kind of give an overview here and then open it up for discussions, but some strategies that we've seen that's been pretty helpful for us is we do a big kind of social media strategy. We use Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. For us and for our audience, LinkedIn is really kind of where our audience is. And we've put together, private groups through the social media. We also use Canva, which is a free platform that you can use to create graphics. You can set up events through social media and then actually invite people to the events and, make sure that you're doing regular postings. So some ideas for networking. We've used some tools. There's one, again, that's either very inexpensive or free called Hopin. Another one called KikoChat. Some of you may be familiar with Slack. And then, of course, we're on Zoom today. So I do have a list of vendors that are for small to large organizations, for networking events, for learning management. So if that is something that you're interested in, you can actually find them at solutions.orgcommunity.com. And then the other kind of, again, inexpensive way that we've provided year-round content is a tool called Thinkific to do online education. And then we have a newsletter that we use a product, again, it's free or it's at minimal cost, depending on kind of what level you want to use, but it's called Raza.io, and it actually produces a newsletter based on content that you want to acquire from other sites. So for instance, if you have members that are developing blogs or things like that, all you have to do is put in their RSS feed, and then it automatically creates a newsletter for you. So that has been very, very effective. But with that said, those are just some of the tools that we've used for engagement. Would love to hear from you all if you have questions regarding engagement or other ways that you have engaged with your members online.
So again, feel free to use the chat if you want to offer those kinds of things, or feel free to unmute your mic and share with us directly. They're thinking, Sherry. They're thinking very hard.
Well, we can, and we can always come back to this too. As people are kind of thinking through, like I said, I kind of just put together some ideas to start a conversation. But as everybody's kind of thinking through, ways that you can engage your constituents, either virtually and or in, it can be in person too, but what is that, how do we really optimize engagement? And I think it's gotten harder and harder over the last year because there's so much going on. There's so much free content. A lot of people are developing education online and hopefully getting back to in person. But, really, how do we go about making sure that, we don't lose our audience and we're continuing to engage them? So I think that, some of the things that we've seen associations and other state organizations do is just have kind of weekly meetings sometimes as just a casual conversation of, what's going on in the environment today, whether they're weekly, monthly, but, kind of always creating some touch points with your members on a regular basis. Kevin, do you have any other thoughts before we move on?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about, when you want to go and, acquire those new members or keep existing ones engaged or have them, keep coming back for more, you still have to remember, the three different phases of getting to that person to, become a member or get engaged. And that's, the awareness, the nurturing, and then your commitment. So while these social media platforms are great, I think you still need to build in, are they aware about your organization? Are you nurturing them? And then what's your commitment to them so they can keep engaging?
All right, great. Thanks, Kevin. So I think we'll move on and we can come back to this if we want to have to talk about a little bit more later on in this hour. But now we want to take a few minutes to talk about what I would call optimizing people. So Leo or Susan, can you put up the next poll? So how is your SEA staffed or managed? You're the key volunteer person, all volunteer managed, full-time paid staff, part-time paid staff, association management company, or other, or it could be, I would use other if it's a combination.
So about half have answered so far. We're still collecting them. And I think we are there. So let's end the poll and we'll share it with you.
So we've got a good majority of all volunteer managed and another third association management company. So, okay, great. So obviously, especially for those that are, all volunteer managed, right? People are doing kind of the work in their spare time, which is, could probably sometimes be a challenge. But some ways that you can kind of think through managing the organization using, when I say kind of people or staffing or human resources, is we've seen organizations outsource pieces of their organization. So that could be, we just want to outsource accounting, or we have somebody that only is outsourcing membership renewals and actually making calls. So we know of one organization that they actually handle membership renewals, and then they're paid on basically commissions. So they don't take any money up front, but trying to get those renewals in is a challenge. So they outsource that piece, or event management. So there's a lot of kind of special, what I would consider kind of specialty types of things that you can consider outsourcing. And then, obviously then there's tasks by either paid staff or by volunteers, and looking at, how do we optimize making sure that everybody's staying on track, especially if there's a combination. We like to use a tool called Rike, but you could use any sort of project management tool to keep tasks and keep people kind of accountable. We worked with one organization and they had an executive director, but most of the staff were volunteers, and they used Basecamp to just kind of keep the conversations all in one place and that sort of thing. And then there's also a consideration of using freelancers, and some of you are using association management companies. I've actually had some success of using Upwork, or there's another, we have a site called .org Freelancer, and I actually hired 2 full-time staff after working with them through hiring them as a freelancer. But again, those are ways that you can just take either isolated projects or tasks, or just keep people on a certain amount of hours a week and to use freelancers. There was a question in the chat I'm just looking at right now. I think one of the challenges is the number of social media tools that are out there. Yes, I agree with that. Do we have the right one? Do we try several? Do we expect members to continually downloading and trying new tools? So Don, I'll answer that question as I had mentioned that we as an organization use a lot of different tools, but if I didn't have a full-time marketing person to do that, I would pick the one where I knew my members were at. And as I kind of mentioned, I know that our members are on LinkedIn, particularly. We work with a lot of medical associations. I know the doctors are on Twitter. And we actually worked with the Librarian Association. They were all on Twitter. So I would say pick the one where you believe your members are mostly at, and where they're, where they are on social media, would be my recommendation. And no, I don't think that we would expect members to continually download and try new tools. There's sometimes reasons to switch, but try to eliminate that to avoid some frustrations. Kevin, do you have any other thoughts on that question? I know we just went back to engagement, but it was a good question.
No, absolutely. You got to figure out where your members are going and see if that's a tool that everyone's going to rally around. Certainly, there's that TikTok going on, which is, the video, are members on that? I don't know. But if you see a certain flock to that, maybe you should consider, putting out messaging there. But still, I think maybe too early to tell with that particular tool. But sometimes you do have to try, but I wouldn't go too crazy on trying everything, because then you won't be able to keep up.
Yeah. So Al just asked, what is the right mix for social and the right content mix for newsletters? Again, I really think this is about where your members are. So if your members are not necessarily on social media, then I would use outreach via newsletters. However, what we do is we make sure that we're seen in all of those places. So for instance, if there's an event, not only do we make sure that the event is being promoted via social, but also in the newsletter, and as well with blogs or anything else that we're doing. We write a weekly blog for our newsletter, but then I also post that on my LinkedIn as well. So we're not duplicating content. We're just kind of repurposing it over multiple mediums. Any other questions? I'm happy to talk about that a little bit more. So now I'll switch over and talk about operations. So the third poll, Leo. Do you feel you have the right technology platforms to support your operations? Yes or no?
All right, about half have answered so far, so we're getting there.
I'm really interested in this answer.
Any bets, Kevin or Sherry?
I'm betting we're on the no side.
Maybe.
Maybe. And we are about there. So we're going to end that poll and we're going to share the results.
Oh, look at that. Almost
Good.
50-50. That's good. That's better than the calls that I normally get. So that's good. So great. So again, just to kind of give you guys a little bit of background of some of the core work that we do as a consultancy. So we do a lot of work in what people would call digital transformation or technology strategy work. So we've got a pretty deep kind of experience with what Kevin calls a symptom to problems, right? So people will call us with, they have an AMS problem, association management system problem, or a financial management system problem, but it's really a problem with the data or things like that. So when we look at technology, we're not always looking at just actual platforms, but how we can use a technology and optimize either something that we currently have or fill some gaps. But I did put together a slide of just some ideas, especially for those of you that are probably are mid to smaller SEAs, is most of our customers use Microsoft Office team collaboration, but you could also use obviously Google Docs. But one thing I wanted to mention about Teams is that what we see is that a lot of organizations have had a vendor that helped them implement Office 365, a lot of times, several years ago. And when Microsoft moved from just using SharePoint to Teams, there has been a lot of gaps or issues with the setup. So you can really use Teams to collaborate and collaborate with your volunteers. In the past with SharePoint, that was very difficult, but it's very easy to do that now. But you really need to look and talk to your partner who has implemented Microsoft 365 for you to look at how that team environment is set up. I'm going to pause there for a second. And Kevin, you might have some other additional thoughts about Teams.
Yeah, I think, why a lot of our clients are adopting Teams is because all their staff can use it. Their volunteers can be invited as guests, and they can use Teams no matter where they are or no matter what device they're on, because it works on your phone, your tablet, your desktop or laptop. And it's the same interface that you have access to on all the different platforms. And also, they're also adapting to using the internal chat. So business intelligence or information is not getting lost in like email or someone's inbox, especially if you're doing a project. All the project assets are usually created within a channel on that team. So everybody knows exactly where the latest, roster list is or the latest project plan or conversations around those projects. And so certainly there's other tools out there, like you'll see down, there's Basecamp or Google Docs. And I know some of you are using some of that as well. But to centralize that communications and assets, I think, are more important. So we're not surfing through our inboxes looking for the most recent and current document.
Thanks, Kevin. So some other tools that you might want to think about using is we've had success using a product called HubSpot that you can use for email marketing. It does get expensive, but you can also use a HubSpot for managing members, and that's free. They have their own kind of CRM. We've also used Active Campaign, where you can set up email marketing campaigns, and it's fairly, it's not as expensive as HubSpot. I would say HubSpot's like the Cadillac, and Active Campaign's kind of in the middle. And then, of course, some of you are using MailChimp. Some other things that you guys may want to consider if you're using QuickBooks Online. I just set up for ourselves a payroll system called Gusto, which is very easy to use. I wish I was doing a lot of this manually myself and wish I would have looked at this product a while ago, but it kind of handles all of your payroll, tax information, all those types of things. It's really a slick product. The other thing I'll just bring up really quick, just because we like the tools, for PowerPoints or things like that, we use a product called Slide Model. And then there's another free product called Beautiful.ai, which is pretty cool. You can kind of just put in a word that you might look for a picture and say it's a fish, and it'll pull up through the internet like all the different images and stuff, and you can choose to put into your PowerPoint slides, and it's all an online tool, which is really nice. But the other thing I think is, we can answer any questions around this, but what we feel is really important is, really looking at business process optimization. With a lot of organizations that we work with, we see that usually it's not the tool, it's the business process, or there's multiple people doing the same thing, which ends up requiring a lot of time. So those are just some things that we would use or recommend, but I'd love to hear in the chat if there's other tools that you guys are using that you want to share with the group that's been very helpful for you managing your SEA.
Yeah, Andrew did post about the benefits he's seeing from using Basecamp, about keeping all the communications together instead of surfing through Outlook. So sounds like Michigan is using that.
Hey, Drew, not to put you on the spot, but would you be willing to share exactly what you do with Basecamp right now? I mean, is it just for, at one time, maybe your annual meeting, or are you doing more with that?
Sure. Yeah, we started with just pulling our communication together. I mean, normally it'd be a reply all, reply all, reply all, and
Sure.
the thread would go 3 different directions, but it'd have the same subject. So it's nice being able to make a message for our scholarship discussion, or for the March monthly meeting, or the April monthly meeting. And people who don't want to be in Basecamp on the internet all day still get email updates. But if you want to turn those off and just have your little pop-up on Internet Explorer that says you have a new message, it's great to keep those together.
Good. No, appreciate that. That's interesting to hear. And I think, like Kevin was inferring, it also, now you have a change of command, and the new vice president comes in, or the new secretary comes in, and they could look at and find all that information.
Yes, that's great too.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Kevin.
I was going to say, we work with the CEO of the National Barbecue and Grilling Association. Believe it or not, there is an association for that, which was mostly volunteer or part-time. And they implemented, or the CEO implemented, Basecamp for everything, just as a way to track all the communications and the projects. And before, this was pre-pandemic, but he had part-time staff all over the country, so they were able to collaborate, online no matter where they were. So it really helped their operations out.
So Kelsey asked about a calendar. And I guess I need a little bit of clarification on recommendations on a calendar tool. Are you looking to keep a calendar that is internal for the organization? Or are you looking for, I guess there's a couple ways I can answer this. And maybe if you wanted to clarify in the chat or take yourself off of mute. We do use Office 365 for calendars. You can use Google Docs, but I also use Calendly, which so people can see my calendar and set up appointments with me. So those are some calendar type of tools that do that. I think there's a couple out there that are like that, like Calendly, where you can have people see, see where you have availability in your calendar.
Yeah, Kelsey, can you share that with us, what you're kind of looking for?
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thanks.
Okay, I was thinking more sharing calendar amongst all of our volunteers. I think what we're sending out individual invites, but as those invites get updated or changed or moved around, it's not always filtering through everyone's calendar. So I don't know if there's a better way to try to do that, because everyone's kind of using their own filtering through their own calendar systems. If I don't know if Basecamp has a calendar component, or if there's something that could be a little bit more cohesive.
Has anybody had any experience?
Well, Basecamp does have a calendar function. Yes, it does. Is that the best one? Uncertain. Like with anything, calendars are sacred and people don't want to share, but they want to share, but they want things to merge. Yeah, Kelsey, I'm not too sure either. Maybe there is an ultimate Uber calendar, but I don't know. I'm not aware. I would defer to our two presenters to see if they know more.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good one, because everyone's on their own little calendaring system, if it's Google or Outlook or some other one. And then the meeting gets, Kelsey, is a situation where the meeting gets changed from like 12 to 2 or something like that, or?
Yeah, that's what I'm noticing, that if an event gets canceled or moved, it doesn't always get trickled through to all of our volunteers. And part of that, I'm sure, is user management on our volunteers' side. But if there's an opportunity to make it easier for them, I guess.
Yeah.
I think I'm sorry, Sherry.
Oh, go ahead, Don.
I was just going to observe that, one of the challenges, maybe less with each of the individual tools than how it all could optimally fit together. We use Basecamp. Historically, we've used Dropbox as kind of the organizational archive, and are now trying to make the switch to Google Drive. And obviously, there's, as Kelsey says, we in California would like to just have some way for all 5 of our organizations. We have 5 regional independent associations, and then the state organization, which is an organization of organizations. We would like a lot more to be kind of seamless between each other. And so I think what, looking out a ways, kind of the solution that seems like that would be the magic one would be a single thing that handled your organizational communication, your outgoing emailing, your database, and your outward facing websites, your calendars, your organizational archives, and have that all kind of work together and not be a $500,000 Salesforce product. Or it would be so in a way, it's kind of the integration of the various things that seems to slow us down as much as anything.
I was going to tease you, Don, and say you were going fine until you mentioned a price tag, and then all of a sudden everybody went, Of course you can't get it for that price or less.
Yeah, so there's another question of how do we know if we need an AMS or if our AMS is the right one? Kevin, I'll throw that one to you since you're our resident AMS expert.
Sure, thanks. So that is a question that a lot of, I think, our clients would ask themselves, do we have the right AMS and how do we know? I always go back to what is it you're wanting or trying to do or need to do? What is the absolute, must-haves that we need to be doing? Some of these AMSs are trying to do it all. It's something similar to what Don was saying, can we have it all in one system? You could, but it may not work as efficiently as you would think, because there's probably a few different schools of thought. There's the traditional AMS has gone very wide in attempts for functionality, from everything from managing members to recording payments, invoices, marketing, events, committees, abstract, all these different things, but they're only an inch deep in that functionality. So what tends to happen is we go out and say, well, I need a better event system, and I'm going to use Eventbrite because, I want to throw out a couple of custom registration demographics, for example. And so now there's a school of thought of, well, maybe make that AMS or a customer relationship management system really smaller or tighter, but have deeper functionality, and then let that integrate with the other tools you're using. So let it integrate to an Eventbrite or integrate to QuickBooks that you're using, or FreshBooks, or whatever your accounting system you're using, instead of trying to force let me get an all-inclusive system that has 12 modules, and 9 of the modules have very light functionality because it only goes so deep. And then now you're stuck with, okay, I have this AMS, but now I have 6 other systems around it that aren't really integrated really well. And now I feel like I'm paying twice for the same, to accomplish the same goal. So really understand really what you're trying to accomplish, and can the current system do that core thing? Can it track my prospects? Can it flip the membership? Can it sync up to national when it's time to do that? Can it handle event registration, collect funds and fees? And if it can't do that, are there systems out there that can? Probably so. And do you need more than one system? When we started .org Community about 6.5 years ago, we were first managing out of spreadsheets, which I'm sure some of you are still doing, it's very normal to do that. And then we decided, well, let's look at a CRM, and there was a free CRM out there, and we downloaded that or started using that. But then, we couldn't export or do reports. There was some other things we couldn't do, and so we decided to use something else. And I think we made a lightning jump, and we started using like Microsoft CRM because it came with our subscription, and we're like, oh, it's using it. But that was overkill. That was like having a jackhammer to put a little screw in the wall or something. It was just too much. And then we jumped over to HubSpot because that was really easy to use. So, but what we failed to do, as we were our own worst customer, is we didn't write down the list of what do we absolutely need this system to do, and then let's see what's out there. We kind of were just like, oh, let's get this one because it's free, because we were starting off. And then we went to, well, we already got Microsoft, so might as well use that license. But we never said, what are write down, what are the core things this CRM or AMS needs to do? And today we're in much better shape because we have people asking us, what are the core things we need the system to do? So I'm just leaving you that advice is definitely think about what does that system really need to do, and what does it really need to integrate with? Because you can integrate things like Eventbrite and Zoom, right? If you're doing a meeting and you want to capture the revenue or the fees through Eventbrite and then automatically send them the Zoom link, right? So you can put a middle layer in between there and connect those two systems. That middle layer is called a Zapier, and it's you literally point and click. You click on your event, you click on your Zoom, and it ties it together. You run a test, and it all works. So there are things out there that are free, certainly, but I think understanding your core requirements is important.
So as I'm going to go to another question that I got, because I'm going to turn off the PowerPoint here in a minute. But if you guys want to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can use your phone and turn on the camera and hover over the QR code, and that'll connect us. So I do put out a lot of content. And blogs and stuff on a regular basis around association management. So if you're interested in doing that. But in the meantime, how do I decide between hiring an association management company or an executive director? So that's a question. It's interesting, I would say some of that is dependent on revenue, right? So an association management company can manage obviously all the operations or a portion of the operations. Sometimes that is kind of an easier way to manage operations because they can run the full kind of gamut of management. So, I had said before, how Kevin and I started the organization, we were hiring freelancers and kind of managing ourselves, but it would have been nice if we had the cash to actually hire an association management company so we didn't have to worry about all of those things that are, from events to membership to just, general operations. So there's also very small kind of boutique AMCs, and then there's very large ones. So I've seen that, and people have success depending again on what you need from an organization. But it seems to be the trend that a lot of folks these days are kind of going to those more boutique type of smaller AMCs, and sometimes that have a specific niche in your profession. So hopefully that answers the question. So I'm going to stop sharing here for now. So other questions, thoughts, things that you may want to share with the group?
Yeah, feel free to write it in chat, but hey, we could see you, or at least we could see your name. So feel free to turn on your cam and say, hey, I do have a question. So be happy to take those questions live too, either way. We were talking about AMCs and executive directors. We get those questions sometimes at our office, and we try to direct them. And I would assume you would agree, you try to stay within your state if you can, because they obviously understand association specifics for the state of Georgia, Nebraska, Illinois, correct? You wouldn't want to necessarily hire someone outside of your state, or is that okay?
Yeah, Drew just asked a question about keeping books in Excel right now, and QuickBooks seems to be the gold standard. So Drew, yeah, QuickBooks Online is, it's very popular. And it can do what I think you need to have done with, invoicing receipts and, the reports you need for end of year taxes and things of that nature. There is another system out there called FreshBooks. It's probably, I don't know, FreshBooks maybe anywhere between $8 and $15 a month, depending on the features you want versus
Not
maybe
crazy.
QuickBooks, which I think, can get into, 30, 40, 50 right off, pretty quick.
Yeah.
So maybe take a look at that. And I'm sure FreshBooks, just like QuickBooks, has the whole, there's like a starting, middle group, some kind of tiered pricing with the functionality.
Sure.
But I've heard some people using FreshBooks as well.
Okay.
Um,
We don't have payroll. We don't have too
Right.
much. Invoicing goes through our AMS. So
Right. So you just need
something bare
the
bones
AP.
is all we
Yeah.
really need.
Yeah.
And QuickBooks is a big jump.
Yeah. Especially if your AMS is doing all the AR cash receipts, you just need the other side. Sounds like. Yeah. Maybe take a look at FreshBooks and see what they have. But I think other than that, then you get into some really expensive kind of situations.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Thanks for your question, Drew.
I'm looking too, David Linton was talking about sharing a executive secretary or an executive director with other organizations. I would assume that makes a lot of sense, especially if they, like you're inferring, there may be a boutique or a smaller organization. They might be able to do that one, yours, a few others, smaller ones.
Yeah,
That's a great
absolutely.
idea. That fractional staffing, where they're fractional, quarter time to Oregon, quarter time to North Carolina, whatever that looks like. But they have that industry background knowledge, who the members are, kind of the structure of the 44 state associations and national and all those different things. So there might be some leverage there.
So as I kind of told my story of my background, one of the associations that I worked with was the American Academy of Dermatology, and they actually had an AMC, Association Management Company, that did management of dermatology societies. They got rid of that business, but when they did, that's, Leo, exactly what they did. They took 2 or 3 of them, kind of got together and then hired fractional execs, where it's kind of either a managing director or executive director. And so in this one scenario, her name was Victoria. So one organization had her on Tuesdays and Thursdays, the other one had her on Mondays and Wednesdays. So they would do their board meetings when they had her, whatever those cases might be. And then someone Jessica said, North Carolina has a small AMC. They manage books, database, social media communications, and data operations, as well as big events like our conferences. So that's actually very helpful. I do know that, managing some of the database work and the bookkeeping and stuff can be tedious. So it's good. And even if you can't hire a full AMC, as I mentioned, you can just get a bookkeeper or somebody who handles customer service and the bookkeeping and databases. I mean, there are a lot of groups out there like that too.
Hey, Jessica, I see you there, and without embarrassing you too much, so you can yell at me later. I'm wondering if you'd be able to share maybe a little bit about, your organization, but also, North Carolina obviously approached you. How did you find each other? How did that relationship build, or whatever you would like to share?
So I am actually with the Association Management Company, and we just recently started with SCA of NC, and I actually had a connection there working with several board members in another association. So that's how we got connected. But it's a really nice group, and but we do mainly the day-to-day activities so that the board can really focus on their strategy and what they want to carry out, and then we just focus on carrying out their goals for them.
Great.
So you take all the operations and let the
Correct.
exec worry about managing
the boring stuff, and
right?
they get the fun stuff. Correct. Yeah.
Well, and it takes some of these decisions out of having to figure out what tools to use too, right? Because you guys have all that infrastructure already there.
So we have some of the technology and the software that we can use. So.
Yeah, and then your staff's already trained on that tech and
correct.
Have a routine of when to post and when to like and tag and yeah, that's good. How big is your group, Jessica?
We're a staff of 5, so we are a small group, and we our niche is actually small, medium-sized associations. So.
Right, but that's exactly what we're talking about. Is you understand the small business, and you're coming together to help other small businesses.
Yeah, and it's when we're on site, we are always SEA of NC. We're never our company. We're just
Right.
always SEA of NC staff. So.
All right, can I embarrass someone else maybe? I see Oliver Burt on the call. Oliver, you represent Utah, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, if you're able to hear me and you're able to respond, I'd love to be able to know a little bit about Utah. But if not, hey, I'll go back to Kevin and Sherry. So yeah, okay, and we have that, as you well know. What we've shared with you before is that about half of our organization, about 22, are 100% volunteer. The other 22 have everything from a full-time person dedicated to them to an AMC to combinations thereof, or just someone that says, hey, I'll take care of your website and your invoicing and leave me alone for everything else. Yeah. So it is a true mix. It is a true mix.
Yeah, so with SEAU of Utah, we have a part-time person that kind of runs the main day-to-day or month-to-month activities. The rest of us are volunteers, so all of our finances, we're actually looking into getting some help on the finance side of things because our volunteers, I guess it's just taking too much time for them. And so we've been looking at, hiring somebody on a monthly basis for like an hourly type of agreement that they can come in and do our books. And then the responsibility of the volunteers is just to review that and make sure, funding and spending and everything is appropriate. So that's our basic organization.
Oliver, thank you. Appreciate your input. Thank you. Any other questions, concerns, problems, redirection? We got about 4 minutes left. We could wrap it up with one more question if someone has one. So you did such a good job. You covered it all. I like that. I think they're looking for a lunch break, Kevin and Sherry. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no, if we're standing between you and lunch, I think one of the things that one of the themes that I picked up here is, really understanding the gaps, right? And things that you don't want to do versus what you want to do and can do. The things you don't want to do or you want to outsource or give that away or, not be a part of that. I think, Oliver said, looking for an accounting. I mean, that's great. Hire part-time CPA to, make sure the books are looking good, but then you focus on vision, the leadership, recruitment, whatever that looks like.
Sherry, any closing thoughts?
No, just to kind of add on to Kevin, I think that's a good thing to think about as you're managing your organization, and especially if you're growing, to look at what you're doing well, what either where your gaps are, where you might be able to outsource or find resources or technology to do that, and then what you just hate doing. So I will tell you, since I started my business 16 years ago, I do not want to keep my books. I have QuickBooks, but I have a bookkeeper, I have a CPA. I'm like, I always say, I do not want anything to do with the numbers. Somebody else needs to do that. So, but you guys may be just the opposite, because you guys are probably maybe more into the numbers than trying to want to manage the creative and social media, for instance. So, so kind of look at what those things are that you're comfortable doing or like doing, keep those things and think about how you manage the others. And really look at, I would say kind of overall, what is really important to sustaining the organization, right? And it's really all about the members, and that I think that member engagement, and how do we make sure that we're doing that really well, and we're not getting bogged down in some of the operations for whatever reason it might be. So hopefully you guys got a couple tips from today, and Kevin and I are still always happy to answer any questions, or you're looking for a resource, feel free to shoot us an email or connect with us. Like I said, on LinkedIn, we're happy to help out where we can.
And we were thrilled to have both of you here today. And thank you so much for sharing your ideas. Yes, we could spend 2 hours on any one of these topics.
Right.
But again, we just wanted to do a broad brush because again, who knows? If someone knows a little more now, they'll be better off.
Great.
Absolutely. All
Thanks
right.
for having us.
I appreciate everybody's time. Thank you all for attending and sticking with us to the very end. We look forward to seeing you later today and tomorrow.
Great. Enjoy the rest of your conference.
Thank you.